Hello, once again. It is the CyberDudes podcast. It is the date. What's the date? I always forget
15th.
the date. It's the 15th. It's the 15th. A day behind schedule because I had a mini meltdown yesterday right before we were about to record. Just losing confidence in the whole thing. And yeah, it was really fun. I spent uh not too much time, but just remembered a little bit too much about the very modest viewing figures at the moment. But it's still early days. But please do watch more, watch more. It'll help my confidence and help my sense of self-worth. No, seriously, I was in a position of sort of thinking about like, do we is this worth it? But then again, with these are good chats that I have with you. Omar. I forgot to do the introduction. I'm Robin Thornton having existential crises, and he is Omar Sangarima talking me down from quitting the whole bloody thing.
I do what I can.
It's appreciated. Oh, right. Oh, how are you doing?
Uh, Pretty good. I'm especially relatively, right?
You're better than I am.
just regular, regular day. Another day living the dream. Ready to talk some cyber.
Oh, God, yes. Well, I mean, today is cyber adjacent, isn't it? So, we'll get into all of that in good order. But first, as always, it's the news. The news. So this is all up to yesterday, actually. So current as of the 14th, not the 15th. We have National Public Data has gone bankrupt or has filed for bankruptcy, and all I can say for that is good scumbags, absolute scumbags. You may recall this is the Florida-based firm who scraped a load of data and then caused like a 3 billion record data breach because they were stupid and careless and really deserve everything that they get. We've got another one from the Register, 77,000 records, customer records breached in that one. That one seems a little bit worrying from what I read out of it because they have kind of downplayed it a little bit. The subheadline on the Register saying, but hey, no worries, the firm claims no evidence of data misuse. I'm sure that's fantastic for the 77,099 people whose personal information was nicked back in August, especially since that Fidelity Investments is a investment platform. It's great. Sure they love the fact
And
that
it's
they're
happened before for Fidelity too.
mm,
That's the kicker for me.
yeah. I'm sure those people love the fact that their life savings and retirement funds maybe at risk of being stolen. It'd be great.
Nothing to worry
Uh
about.
no, it's fine. It's all fine. We have also from Info Security Magazine, 31 new ransomware groups joined the ecosystem in 12 months, which is despite a flurry of law enforcement action to take down ransomware groups. There's been a 30% year-on-year rise in the number of active ones. Weirdly enough, the activity hasn't necessarily gone up in relative proportion. So it's not the activity's not gone up 30% as well, which suggests a lot of these new groups are small players, situations, sort of fragmented, unskilled entrants. It does raise the possibility or question of have these people been enabled by AI, kind of lowering the barriers to entry in terms of making it so you don't have to be quite as skilled to pull all of this off. But hey, that's a concerning one. Let's go into the spotlight articles. Omar, what have you got for us this week?
So apologies that it's behind a paywall, but I think you can work
Wall Street
around it.
Journal.
Exactly.
You
But
can't work around their paywall. It's a pain in the
no,
arse.
the 12-foot
12 foot doesn't work.
says that they've been coerced slash collaborate in a partnership to not do that for them. But
Kind of
you can
defeats the
poke
purpose,
around.
doesn't it?
It really does. But you can poke around on the internet. Essentially, the TLDR on this whole thing is, holy smokes, China's good at hacking.com, right? I think that's probably a website you could go to at this point, and I can neither confirm nor deny if it's essentially a honeypot. But overall, it's, I think, a good look. And I sent you something this morning to kind of follow up on it, and that's really what
Yeah.
I'll harp on, is essentially the concept that anything which could strengthen the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party's
Mhm.
economic position, is viewed as vital to their national defense. It's a bit of a different, at least official take than the United States has, although you can get into discussions of soft power, hard power, how we project since the end of the Cold War and beyond.
Mhm.
However, in general, the CCP has been using, I think, cyber espionage, industrial espionage, uh, jacking into what we ourselves set up for wiretapping and backdoors to surveil American citizens. And I chuckle at that. There's no such thing as a secure backdoor. So surprise Pikachu face when another entity finds a way to get in there and manipulate it, which is, this is everything that
Mhm.
any cyber person ever decries about the concept of a purposeful installed backdoor on anything of merit and anything of note. This is what Apple, of course, put their foot down during the San Bernardino issue. And
Yeah.
I think this is something that's obviously been proven out, at least from a technical standpoint. I don't want to get into should they or shouldn't they, but from a technical standpoint, this is just always going to happen. You set up backdoors, other folks are going to be able to get in there. China's on there in terms of it's inside the surveillance apparatus that our own government uses to keep us, quote unquote, safe. There's
Mhm.
that. They're also straight up on industrial systems and critical infrastructure, both on the United States mainland and definitely anywhere remotely close to Taiwan or Hong Kong. So, they're classified as the hacking group. The bears are out in Russia. Here it's the typhoons, so anything
Yep.
that you see, whether it's salt typhoon, hot typhoon, cold typhoon, whatever X typhoon you have, it's in the galaxy of the CCP, of the Chinese Communist Party's hacking apparatus, and in a word, they're everywhere. It's just
What was
expected. They're on our systems. Period.
what was the typhoon from Pacific Rim? It was like the three-armed mech,
Oh,
wasn't it?
oh no,
It was the
and
triplets.
I think that's there's some sort.
They were
I would
Chinese, weren't they?
I wouldn't be shocked that's the connection. Truly, because these things, yeah, I think, certain groups make the distinction of, okay, this area, right? You have sandstorm and whatnot for, Iranian
Yeah.
hacking groups or associates of Iranian hacking groups. Typhoon is now pretty much the representative, the umbrella term for any folks coming out of the good old CCP. You have the Bears obviously coming out of, you guessed it, Russia or
I
the
still find that funny.
it's listen, for many reasons, right? I know the reason you're talking about. I
Yeah.
laugh too. I definitely chuckle. And really, it's just, if you have a back door, it's gonna get got. It's not always gonna get got by folks that you can even nominally trust.
Mm.
Definitely can't do it with these folks. And they're on critical infrastructure. They're also still the good old fashioned smashing and grabbing of stuff that contributes to our GDP. So,
Mhm.
they're going to grab blueprints, they're going to grab research, they're going to grab anything that they really can get their hands on. And I think the main takeaway from today's or this week's stories for this particular subject is that it's really the sophistication has grown by leaps and bounds. I think the phrasing in Ian's or Sands's communique this morning was, it's no longer smash and grab. So I did a misnomer there, but they're much stealthier than they used to
Yeah.
be, and they're part of the P in the persistent threat. They can just lurk for days, ages, weeks, months. I'm thinking of even the Marriott hack where they were on there for 9 months. I think, and it was slightly attributed to some folks coming out of the CCP. They're
Hmm.
on there.
Are you talking about, wait, is that the Starwood one?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was attributed to the CCP only because there was a lot.
A shame, anyone, but be wary. Be wary. There are unscrupulous individuals out there who do not feel the same way about you. They just want your money.
Listen, I was definitely can say I was a big fan of pro wrestling when I was younger.
Hmm.
I've left it and come back to it, oddly enough. Older, I like the spectacle, right?
Hmm.
Especially Japanese pro wrestling, as it's very, very close to actual MMA fighting. Believe it or not, the lines there are very blurred. Where
Where
I'm
are you
going with
going
this
with
is,
this?
yeah, exactly. Where I'm going with this is, you really can't get over willful suspension of disbelief. So while I like that there's tooling, this is not to say that I think you can't really tech away still this type of vector for getting got. And I think it's still a ways away where we're even approaching that, even with the advent of sticking LLMs on either side of the
Mm.
equation. But I do, as you said, I do like where this is headed, but it's not anyone can get got at any time, right? Even if we're in this profession ourselves, there's still
Mm.
certain things where you go, oh wow, thanks for my spam filter for catching that, because maybe if it had popped in front of me, I might have clicked.
Yeah,
I'm not
definitely.
above that, neither are you. So this is a step in the right direction, but it's not a way
Hmm.
to get complacent with it.
Yeah. So this tool does uses AI technology to flag potential digital scams. The Ask Silver smartphone tool interacts with users via WhatsApp. So once they're signed up, users receive a one-time email with a QR code to scan, which opens the WhatsApp chat. There's two aspects of this that are just rife in scams: WhatsApp
Right?
and QR
I
codes.
knew, I
I love
read the
the
same
irony.
thing.
I
Yeah,
really love
yeah.
the irony. All they need to do is send a screenshot of the content they want checking, which could be a scam email, it could be a website or a text message, to the number that Ask Silver uses, and the the application will tell them if it's got red flags. If the latter, it's going to suggest steps to stay safe online and offer options for automatically reporting that scam to the authorities, which is a good thing to do. You might think that reporting to the federal phishing um, hotline, I guess you could call it, is a waste of time. But those do get taken seriously, and it's a good piece of sort of collective protection. It's no good to you necessarily because you've already received the scam, but you might help somebody else avoid one. So um, pay it forward, I guess could be the adage there. It's really, it's really funny. There's a paragraph in here. It's actually a quote, and this just sounds literally like ChatGPT has written this. In this digital age where scams are increasingly sophisticated, I mean, come on,
Hey,
that's
I'm not
that's
saying it was
that's a
written by BuzzFeed.
GPTism.
100%. That's
Um,
yeah.
Increasingly sophisticated and scammers are highly experienced. We must empower. Fucking hell, we must empower individuals. We're going to have we must empower individuals to use the rich tapestry now. We must empower individuals with tools that enhance their vigilance and vigilance. Christ, it really is littered, and allow them to live, shop, and buy without fear. That does sound slightly more humany. Um, so yeah, you can find that. I can't remember where we can find that. It doesn't actually say. It just says download. It gives a link here. I guess we're going to put the link in the notes there. But you can grab that. It doesn't actually do a download because it does it through thingy. It does it through WhatsApp.
What's
So
that?
it's
Yeah.
basically just it's just a sign up. It's not a download. Oh well, yeah. We'll put the link in there and you can sign up and see if it's any good. I've not got around to it yet. See what happens there.
I do
Right.
forget you're on WhatsApp, which makes sense. So
Oh yeah, I forget you Americans don't use it all that much. Just find that quite peculiar.
for a Telegram.
Really.
Oh, not at all.
Part of the criminal
No,
fraternity.
not at all. I'm a signal guy through and through.
I still can't quite get my head around what has happened with all of that, which is why we've not done an episode on it, because it's so. I find it just
Byzantine,
so Byzantine, like
labyrinthine.
politically charged in a way that I really don't care about. I'm really not bothered about the French authorities arresting a Russian dude. I just don't care.
Your anti-continentalism is showing. I just want to say that, but
It's not deliberate. Yeah, I'm just not bothered. I just don't kind of don't really care. I like politically charged. Nice segue into what we're going to do here, because the main topic of this episode is election tampering and misinformation, something that's not at all going to get people riled up and pissed off in the comments of YouTube Shorts. Although I like doing that. I like being provocative with it, because there was that JD Vance joke that I made, and honestly, there's a couple of people lost their minds. Right, I think this topic was your suggestion for the timing, and given we do have the election in 2-3 weeks time, why don't you start us off? Where do you want to lead off with here?
It's here, and it's here to stay. It's no longer something that we can export south of the border in order to destabilize countries that we want preferable trade agreements with. It's coming onshore, reshoring, as the globalists might say. But election tampering, it's not really totally new. Again, it's just new to us. I think regardless of where on the political spectrum you fall, it was a giant issue during the last election. Some would argue that it was an issue prior, but it just hadn't reached that critical mass of mainstream attention. But certainly, by the time the dust settled on the previous election, and then the one after that, and even the one before that, and then probably maybe the one even prior, and also abroad, right? There's been some issues with what the heck happened with Brexit. I know it's a sore subject, but it goes part and parcel. It's here. It's an increasingly small window of things that you can absolutely bank on if it comes from the internet, that it's absolutely great and verifiably true. I've been victim to misinformation where it's a source that I trust, but I just didn't do my double checking. That's part of it. There's so many things that are flying back and forth regarding certain issues on this election where, honestly, man, like, I think the last time I took the time to do the sort of research and fact checking that I would need to do in order to get all of my ducks in a row on some of these issues, I did it for school, and I've given up. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's certainly a little bit more of truthiness with certain sources, but it's just one of those things it's here, right? We can dive into, say, the one that's coming to mind now is that poor town in Ohio, right, where supposedly Haitians were eating pets, right?
Yeah,
That
where
was
they're eating the cats and the dogs. They're eating the goose wearing wooden clogs.
Okay,
Like,
listen,
honestly, I when I listened to that, like, the first time I watched that debate, I was like, is he quoting Dr. Seuss?
it really there's an eloquence to it that, in the 90s you could make a rap career out of that. I think rap has progressed now, but
Oh, that's
back
so going to
then,
get sampled for some house tracks.
it
It's gonna be
absolutely
that. It's gonna be the build up, and then it's gonna be they're eating the cats and the dogs, and then drop.
exactly. Like, how much is the fish? Remember that old chestnut from back in the day? But you have, yeah, man.
Which
Oh
one
man,
was that?
I might be aging myself. We'll have to look it up, put
I
it in the
remember the
notes.
one.
Yeah,
I remember the £1 fish one for
yeah.
the guy in the market in London.
No, no. Yeah, I think it was on that side, but it was
Come
done
on,
into a
ladies,
house.
come on, ladies, £1 fish.
No, no. It was just how much is the fish, and then the
Ah,
beat drops.
I don't
But
remember that.
yeah, no, it's a classic. It's a classic. The internet's a wild place, but it's a wild place to the point now where I think it is having some sort of effect on veracity with regards to issues and positioning of candidacies within the greater internet. hellscape, I should say. But
Mhm.
really, it's here. It's happening. Now, I don't want to be a complete nihilist, but I will be completely upfront. Aside from taking time off from work and sitting and really doing a deep dive and finding out what's true and what's not as much as I can via internet sources, I am really at a loss for how to advise our faithful listeners on where to go with this subject. So I'm hoping you can help me out.
Christ.
Yeah,
That's
it's a nice setup.
that's expansive. Jesus. Well, because I mean, trying to think how any of my any of my three main sort of points that I was considering here really sort of tie into that. Um, I mean, how you deal with it. I think first things first. It's a kind of like it's a not know thy enemy, but at least try to.
Sure.
Um, and I guess that's tricky. I consider probably start with the fact that this is not new, right?
Mm,
Um, kind of misinformation to and propaganda
mm,
to sway the political process. And I'm not necessarily talking propaganda in the sense of the Soviets or what the Nazis did in the 30s and 40s. I'm talking more stealthy propaganda, the likes of foreign states meddling in others' affairs throughout kind of history. So there's examples here like the Soviet Union. They didn't just do propaganda with themselves, right, with their own people. They did it with others. We had um, Operation Infection, something in the 1980s. That was a KGB disinformation campaign that was claiming that HIV/AIDS had been created by the US government as a biological weapon. Now, that's complete horseshit, quite obviously. What on earth would be the point?
Look into
But
it, bro.
it's
Look into it. That's
do your own research.
that's but
I'm not
all it
going to
has
feed this for you. It's the Instagram comments section, not an
all,
essay.
all it has all it but that's I think I'm being cheeky here a little bit, but
Mm,
some of that's all you need to do with this, right? Like we can go back
yeah,
to that point later. I know you got some hot heat, but that's all you need to do with that stuff.
yeah. Well, and that is kind of the point. Like, for you need, and this is the problem. This is why I dislike the modern day scenario with social media and all that because, and I've said this before. I'll say it till the cows come home. Lots of the conspiracy theorists, these fringe idiots, they always existed. Now they, with social media, they just have a means to amplify their voice. They can find each other, and now also you can see them, and they can influence you. So that's kind of the problem. And also, pretty I don't think I've said it on a past episode before as well. The current state of the internet, or the monetization of the internet within the last 10 years or so,
Mm.
has led itself to some really incentivizing the most perverse behaviors, the kinds of things that honestly it generates negative reactions. It's man-child idiots doing man-child things is the shit that gains clicks, and then that's what gains engagement, and engagement means eyeballs, and eyeballs means more valuable advertising real estate, which means more money for the platforms. I think I was reading something recently about people were decrying sort of like the death of the chronological forum format because you kind of had to read through everything, right? You had to read
Mm.
through the batshit takes, the good takes, the bad takes, the takes that are taking down the batshit takes,
Mm.
and you got to form much more of a or you got a much more holistic view of how everybody thinks, as opposed to how it is now, where basically the most controversial or the sort of like the first people who are there in the comments section, all of their stuff gets reacted to first, so that sort of like bubbles up to the top because it's the most liked and the most commented and the most replied to, etc., etc., etc. And that's what sticks, and that's the opinion that you tend to see as being prevalent, and it amplifies probably beyond what is realistic or what's reality, the prevalence of that opinion, because it's bullshit that is popular, that people like to, where people have not engaged their brains and have just sort of gone on with it. Some the reductive points that oversimplify an issue, those are the ones that go up, and the dissenting voice that is full of nuance and where you actually have to engage your brain and do some critical thinking, not wake up people, think for yourself bullshit. So the reductive thoughts that don't require an awful lot of consideration, that are easy to engage with and easy to go along with, like things like, oh, immigrants are all taking our jobs, they're eating the cats and the dogs, things like stupid takes like anybody within the LGBT community is just they are child abusers who are trying to molest your kids and all of that sort of stuff, and they're deviants. Those kind of stupid, lazy takes. Things like, oh, cloud seeding causes hurricanes. It doesn't, by the way. That sort of stuff that gets engaged with. It bubbles to the top.
There's lithium. There was lithium in the path of, yeah, you heard that one as well, right?
No, actually, I didn't.
Oh,
but
Melton, that apparently there was the whole thing. Apparently, Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "Hey, they control the weather."
Who's they?
The Jews, apparently. I hate to say this, but like I said, oh, that old trope.
Yeah.
You know, space lasers, right? The Jews are apparently very active in all their spare time, doing a lot of wild stuff. They control the weather. Apparently, there was lithium in the pathway of Milton, and therefore, if you send hurricanes and you level a bunch of that area, then it'll sell for cheap, and folks will be able to come in and take it over. There's
a much easier way of doing that, which is you lobby Congress with your apartheid gremlin money from your massive car company, and you just take it.
I don't know who you could be referring to there, but it's
plus hang on, Milton blasted across Florida, which is the lowest lying state in the union. There's nothing to mine there. It is swamp.
It's lithium, baby. I'm telling you. I'm merely reporting. And here's the thing, right? Exactly. And what I think, to back your point up here, it's how do you engage with this? How do you not engage with it? What do you do? Because the thing that's crazy is that you can hit these folks with, like you said, nuanced takes. You hit these folks with, there's a source. And the thing is, all you have to do is go back and point at anything that maybe potentially was hinky from said source. Said source is completely discredited. And in our post-truth society, we're ripe for influencing from really pretty much anyone. Not just foreign powers trying to influence an election, but it's, go buy a car.
So here's a good point. I'll get into a minute. The very quickly, I mean, the hurricanes thing. My strategy for how does one get around the horse shit is simply to look at, I mean, if it makes you feel angry or riled up or frustrated, outraged, that's sign like number one of going like, is this really what
take a beat
it is? And then kind of look into, I'll use the hurricane example as a something that I applied this kind of logic to, I mean, obviously, I know, like, cloud seeding does not cause this kind of stuff. But I was looking at the conspiracy and I was going, do you know what? This would be a damn sight more credible if you were saying, given that apparently you now were saying that simply clouds cause hurricanes, that would mean that I, having grown up in the UK, where it's clouds constantly, we don't really know what the sun looks like. I should have been experiencing hurricanes my entire childhood. But guess what? I didn't, because clouds don't cause hurricanes. It's warm tropical waters that cause hurricanes. And the warmer the waters are, the more likely the hurricanes are, which means, oh, guess what? As water's warm, we get more and more hurricanes, right? So if you'd said to me, Gulf oil drilling operations are actually ocean warming platforms, ocean warming apparatus, I might think you have a credible conspiracy there.
Sure.
And I mean, of course, obviously, that's stupid. That doesn't fit a right-wing narrative, because then it would mean that Brett and Trent and Taylor in their massive Ford F-350s, who go and get on a helicopter in Louisiana and fly out to the rigs, would actually be complicit in creating the weather events that destroy their communities. It's much easier to blame this on the liberal elite in wherever they may be, DC, New York,
George Soros,
California, exactly. Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. So, but if you'd said to me that Gulf of Mexico drilling platforms were heating the water, I'd say you were still a crackpot, because that's nuts. But at least it would have more credibility than cloud seeding. So, does this make sense? Who and why? These hurricanes, for example, cause tens of billions of dollars and kill many people. And pets, the cats and the dogs. I would argue, if you are after a prosperous society as a government, if you're after a prosperous society, you'd be wanting to avoid all of that damage.
Listen, we're trying to keep
nobody wants that stress.
We're trying to keep a steady supply of wage slaves and kill the middle class. So therefore, the NWO is causing hurricanes at an accelerated pace. This is, I think, we're going around, and when it's targeted again at issues that are germane to the election, it's the same sort of formula, where you put something, you send a tracer round, right, to see what sort of response you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's heated, then that's the messaging that you reinforce. You get your bots, you get your sock puppets,
mm-hmm.
You get other humans on the other side of things that have their bots and their sock puppets, and you can weaponize that sort of outrage, get folks in a lather, and suddenly we're not having actual honest to goodness discussions about issues that folks are going to go to the polls on, as you said, in a few weeks.
Well, I mean, divide and conquer is a classic, adage from warfare, isn't it? Right? Much easier to defeat an enemy that's infighting themselves as it is. So it's quite interesting that you sort of go with the test and fire a tracer, see how it flies. This is exactly the kind of thing that Cambridge Analytica was doing back in the mid 2010s, before the big scandal that existed with Cambridge Analytica, the big data firm which used a massive trove of information from Facebook, something like it was the results of quizzes performed by something like 80,000 people, I think it was, and they managed to, by breaching usage terms of Facebook's, they not only grabbed the data of the people who had done the quiz, but they got their connections and their connections, and basically managed to create a database of 58 million people, and have a pretty good level of I think it was somewhere
accuracy.
in the region of 6,000 data points on any
Yeah.
individual person to predict their leanings and the ways that they could be swayed in their voting patterns and things like that. Now, they were known for the Brexit thing. They're widely considered to have screwed around meaningfully with the Brexit referendum. It was a very sort of a wafer thin win for the Leave campaign. Before this, they were doing it in Trinidad and Tobago, and that was the real trace around. That was where they tested this thing out. Trinidad and Tobago, for those who do not know, which I imagine is probably a lot, they have a sort of split in demographics. It's roughly half Indian, it's roughly half Afro-Caribbean, and Cambridge Analytica were employed by the Indian candidate in their election, because there was an Indian and an Afro-Caribbean candidate going for the for head of state there, employed by the Indian candidate, and Cambridge Analytica advised the campaign that if you can get the Afro-Caribbean young Afro-Caribbean populace not to vote, then you're going to win that election.
You could run away with it, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. So they go and do this campaign. They run this campaign that looks fairly bipartisan, that for some bizarre reason, somehow they managed to justify a don't vote message to the kids, and everybody, regardless of whether they were Indian heritage or whether they were Afro-Caribbean heritage, they all got on board with it. But they knew full well, the Indian candidates campaign and Cambridge Analytica knew full well, when it came down to it, much as everybody had been getting on board with this don't vote, young people don't vote campaign, when it came to the punch, the Indian kids would do what they were told by their parents, and the parents would tell them to go vote. The Afro-Caribbean kids, they knew from just cultural quirks
and data points
that they would stick with it, and that delivered them election. Brexit, we had people who otherwise would have been very pro-EU being fed messages about what the EU does with regard to human rights. They fed these messages to animal rights, people with animal rights activism leanings, stuff like that. They swayed it in that kind of way. They fed an awful lot of false anti-immigration rhetoric. They used very Holocaust-y looking imagery of refugees and said, hey, look, this is what's going to be coming to Britain because of an EU open border policy. And it was horseshit. The images were widely considered to have been proven to have been falsely attributed. They were not refugees at all. It was something entirely different. And very soon after that, screwed around in 2016 election as well. And honestly, it just goes from there. It makes an awful lot of sense for all of this talk in 2020 of the stop the steal and stolen election. It's very, very curious that the company most widely known to have been involved in feeding disinformation campaigns and election manipulation in Western politics in the 2010s and up to 2020 has links with the British Conservative Party, the Republican Party and its donors, and Steve Bannon.
It's a shocker, my friend. And I think one of the things that, again, the ghosts of those previous campaigns come to the forefront anytime this sort of subject pops up, whether I'm thinking about it or if it's in the news. And you can see, I think, a different way of the cybersecurity establishment or the cybersecurity apparatus. And I don't say that pejoratively. I'm trying not to. I'm not the conspiracy theorist here. But, you have people like CISA, the head of CISA. You have people, Department of National Intelligence. You have all sorts of established, dyed-in-the-wool cybersecurity and intelligence professionals going, listen, brass tacks, foreign entity won't be able to completely falsify and overturn an established election. They're going to nibble at the edges. But security-wise, we're solid. Some of that, I would say, is attributed to something that thankfully we haven't fully explored, and I hope we stay away from until we can get it right, which is online voting. That prospect completely and utterly terrifies me. We need a lot of things in place. Exactly. We need a lot of things in place before we're able to even have a head nod towards that being safe to do. But
Yeah.
because we're still quite analog in that instance, completely falsifying an election is still not feasible.
So
But
so this is
mhm,
where I because I put down the same sort of thing here, Jenny Easterly saying the other day
mhm,
that the voting machines are practically unhackable. Lots and lots of people in the comments on LinkedIn jumping on the fact that this practically doesn't mean, or like she said,
completely
virtually
sure.
impossible. It's like practically doesn't mean, or virtually impossible doesn't mean impossible. And I was like, well, yeah, obviously we all know that. That's what virtually impossible means. But it's beyond the realms of statistical probability to be doing it. There is, and here's why I've got reasonable confidence in that kind of statement, is that it comes down to what you said here, like actually tampering with as a foreign entity, actually tampering with results is, on an election of such scale, it's a country of 330 million people, statistically speaking, you have to move the needle an awful lot in raw
Significantly.
vote
Yeah.
numbers in order to
Yeah.
generate a percentage difference. It's 3 million votes. At 3.3 million votes is 1%. That's an
1%.
awful
Exactly.
lot of stuff that you have to sneak past the auditors and the people who are verifying this kind of stuff. Now, the the other sort of, I guess, sad reality about US politics is that actually, by and large, it's a handful of counties in 5 states that decide
Sway the
who's
whole thing.
going to the White House in any 4-year period, which is kind of screwed. So please, for the love of God, ranked choice voting, proportional representation, much better. And because everybody knows, or not everybody, but because it's easy enough to research what those swing counties in swing states are going to be, those would be the ones that you would target, right? Isn't it? Because
Hmm.
that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Having said
Sure.
that, as the as an electoral commission, that's also going to be where your eyes are. It's just the whole thing, it's too fragmented of a system. There's too many touch points, there's too many eyes on it, there's too many checks. As I said, it's too large of a system to be able to get away with things like that and sneak stuff by. It's far easier to get the turkeys to vote for Christmas. As far
Precisely.
as any
Yeah.
entity successfully screwing around in an election of this size, and this is why the whole stop the steal thing 4 years ago was so frigging absurd, is because you have to be wildly as an incumbent head of state, you have to be wildly incompetent to have an election rigged against you by your challenger. You hold all the tools of election
Yep.
tampering. To have them rig it against you is nuts. It's happened, or it's suspected to have happened, very rarely. In Zimbabwe in 2008, Morgan Tsvangirai was accused
Hmm.
of doing it against President Mugabe, but Robert Mugabe was widely considered to be lying shit anyway. So
I was gonna say,
he
not a great
he
guy.
was
Not
he
a
was
great guy.
he was
Yeah.
possibly one of the least trustworthy blokes anyway. Mexico 2006, Philippines 2004, Madagascar 2001, Ukraine 2004, all situations where it was suspected that the challenger might have done some screwing around. By
Mm.
comparison, where the incumbent was doing the rigging, Russia 2012, Venezuela 2013, Belarus 2020. I mean, Lukashenko has been there for like 20 odd years anyway. Uganda 2021, Kenya 2007, Egypt 2014, Iran 2009, Cambodia 2018, Turkey 2018. Nicaragua 2021, DR Congo 2011, Kazakhstan 2019, Equatorial Guinea 2009, Azerbaijan 2013. 15 examples of the incumbent rigging it in their favor. You have to be wildly stupid to allow an election to be rigged against you when you're in office.
It's also just probably goes part and parcel with incumbents have an easier time getting reelected, period. There's a
True.
ton working in their favor with an
Well,
apparatus that's already established and in power. Yeah,
how many
that can be
one-termers are
said.
there? Less than
This
two-termers, aren't there?
absolutely. And until you said ranked choice voting, my rallying cry is term limits. Right? That's a whole other
Mm.
show, I think. But in this case, truly, I think there's more bang for the buck from foreign interference based on the misinformation piece, which is why I feel we covered it in a little bit more depth because it's just much more feasible. And also, there's
Yeah.
you get further for less investment, and you're able to influence outcomes. I think a little bit easier through that apparatus than straight up stealing an election. It's just I'm not out here saying that it's an impossibility,
Mm.
but like it's very highly improbable. It
Yeah.
truly is.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's easier to get turkeys to vote for Christmas. There's also an awful lot more plausible deniability in it. So we're getting close to time on this, but it's kind of as a bit more as a closing thing. I want to go through some of the troll farm stuff that I unearthed in
Mm,
some digging because there's some really interesting social media accounts here that look like they've been run by some, in some cases, some salt of the earth patriotic Texan, and in other cases, some real trailblazer of a civil rights activist. And in either case, there has been absolutely no one of that ilk anywhere near the administration of said account. One of them was, and there's evidence for this. This is a report that ended up at Facebook. There was a Twitter account and Facebook account called Blacktivism.
mm,
All about civil rights. It was purpose was mimicking the Black Lives Matter movement, aiming to exploit racial tensions and manipulate African American communities in the US. Frequently posted inflammatory content that addressed racial issues, police violence, protests, presenting itself as a grassroots advocacy group. The account encouraged protests and often engaged in discussion that heightened racial divides. It gained thousands of followers, engaging with real activists and fostering confusion between legitimate and disinformation sources. I think this is really is one of the problems, honestly, of the left, is that there's so many different views and takes on what
mm.
one thing might mean that people do, like, they kind of argue on the semantics of stuff without realizing that they might actually be saying the same thing or playing on the same side. They kind of get divided on the micro differences in vision. Blacktivism was operated by the Russian Internet Research Agency, which is a splinter of Russian intelligence. Texas nationalist movement, page that sought to promote secessionist sentiments in Texas, creating divisions around state sovereignty and nationalism. That's a really good way to get a country divided. Have a province of it wants to break away and be self-deterministic. They already are as far as the power grid's concerned. That's their bed. They must lie. They made it. They'll lie in it. It posted content advocating for Texan independence, often framing the narrative as a legitimate movement against federal overreach, thus polarizing views on governments and autonomy. Once again, Russian operatives, possibly through proxy accounts.
Mm.
Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I remember seeing that. That was operated by
Don't take
Russian.
that away from me.
A
No,
feminist group, operated by Russian operatives. Seeking
now
to
you're just
exploit divisions within the feminist movement and among progressive groups. Shared
oh
content
so
that appeared to support women's rights, but also promoted internal conflict by pitting different feminist factions against each other.
so it's
Probably
not the
new wave
book,
versus
right?
third wave. No, no, no,
You're
no.
not telling me. Okay.
It was a Facebook page. Oh, there was something else here that I'll Pray for America. It's going to be a classic right of center operated by the Russian Internet Research Agency. Claimed to be a religious group advocating for prayer and support of the United States, but was used to promote divisive political content. Color me shocked. Shared content that invoked religious sentiments while subtly pushing divisive narratives around immigration, race, and politics, fostering a sense of righteous anger amongst its followers. So, I mean, I said here, so we got Pray for America. There was one more. I'm gonna have to find it because honestly, it really did. I thought I found it absolutely wild. There was Heart of Texas. Was well, actually, did I say Heart of Texas in the previous one? I think I might have.
Yes, you did.
Where was the other one? Sorry, scrolling. Oh, yes, being patriotic. I remember seeing that Facebook page.
Yeah.
Russian Internet Research Agency. Page targeted pro-American right-wing nationalist audiences using patriotic themes to stoke anger over immigration, gun rights, and traditional American values. Page spread memes, articles, and posts about American exceptionalism, often promoting anti-immigrant and anti-government conspiracy theories. And we wonder why we're in the mess we're in now with cloud seeding causing hurricanes, apparently. Also encourage real-world events and real-world events and protests, including anti-Hillary Clinton rallies during the 2016 election. Russian group pushing anti-Hillary Clinton stuff, and we've got people stating that Vladdy and Donny aren't friends and aren't all that close. I find it hard to fathom that one. LGBT United, right? So we're not just going after feminists. We're not just going after the black community. We're also going after the gay, lesbian, bi, trans community. Russian Internet Research Agency, again, focused on LGBT issues, plus issues, ostensibly promoting LGBT plus rights, was part of a larger strategy to polarize and provoke conflicts between pro-LGBT plus and anti-LGBT plus communities. So look, it doesn't matter what side of the political divide you're on, you're getting played, right? It's just by sometimes different people. But as we've seen here, we've got groups on both sides of it being tinkered around with the Russian Internet Research Agency. That's to get everybody at each other's throats, right? The real enemy here with this is Russia. Iran seemingly do screw around in some of this stuff as well. That I've seen from what I've seen from research from the past few weeks, my assumption is it's largely because they would prefer a Democrat in the White House because Donnie don't screw with Iran. But hey, look, nobody is immune to this, and I would just consider this, whenever. And here's the real, I guess, as close to cyber as I can get with this is realize that people are using technology to manipulate everybody. And the people who are all sitting there going, wake up, and I'm not a sheep with regards to anti-government conspiracy or sentiment or any of this sort of, I am a free thinker, you're being fed mainstream media news narratives, blah, 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 being brainwashed, etc. You are just as susceptible to all of this as the rest of us. I think the only people who truly have like the sense around it is the ones that look at everything on both sides and just go, what's the underlying motivation here?
All the money.
What am I being made? What does somebody want me to think?
What end?
Yeah. To what end? I don't really know how to close that off.
We always tend to get to really uplifting pieces. So I think we'll leave it at that, and hopefully tomorrow the sun comes out.
I mean, the world will keep spinning for sure. Just how fast and in what direction. And I would, I'd say to anybody, consider whether the things that you think are genuinely aligned with your internal personal value system, or whether you're reacting to things that you have seen that you consider to be inflammatory.
Take a beat. You have to.
Take a beat. Right. Okay. Well, we will be back once again next week. We'll have just the news because it'll be a short one. Please do. If you've enjoyed this, if you've considered it entertaining, thought-provoking, useful, please view it like 2 or 3 more times because it'll help viewership numbers and my sense of self-worth. Like it, comment it. Like, what do you think about the scenario. What do you think about the state of internet discourse and how everybody seems to be at each other's throats and honestly, more divided than ever? Uh, we're really genuinely interested to hear your thoughts on that. Otherwise, if you don't, well, even if you do like and comment, please also subscribe and share with your, please get get this out to, if you enjoyed it, get it out to other people that you are close with, recommend it out. We really appreciate the growing the base, because we've started this from basically a standing start, and it has been tough. We got over the hurdle of trying to record on a regular basis, which like we kind of managed, but
Out of us.
doing this kind of thing, it is work. It takes, and it's not work recording it per se. Sometimes it is doing a bit of the research. Won't lie, I'm not very good at that doing that in a timely fashion. Omar will attest. But it's a lot of work to promote. That's probably the biggest piece, where the most time goes and where it's most draining and demoralizing, where you're trying to promote something as much as you have the energy for it, and it's just not paying off. So I will end this sad, desperate plea for engagement and views and followers, and say thank you, Omar, for this particular chat, and we will see you all again in a week's time.
Adios.